Hello, everybody. This is Christian Schmidt speaking. I would like to thank you all for attending the session today. We are going to cover file sync and share for enterprise companies, jointly presented by ownCloud and IBM. And the topic will be the joint success story between ownCloud and IBM and how we are providing solutions for the challenges that all of you are facing in the era of enterprise transformation, and we will give you the information that you require to understand why we address those challenges and why ownCloud and IBM address those challenges better than any other competitor in the market. Myself, I'm Christian Schmitz. I'm a Senior Director at ownCloud, and I'm responsible for strategic accounts, predominantly in the European area with a focus on public sector customers, large enterprises in Northern Europe, and research and education customers.
And my name is
presenting with me is Götz Menzel, who can probably introduce himself briefly.
Yeah, and my name is Götz Menzel, Sales Leader, Storage in Germany. You already see there's still some German in the announcement, but I'm from Germany.
Thank you, Götz. So let me briefly start off with a case on how ownCloud and IBM have been partners since September 2014. We have had multiple large joint customers deploying ownCloud very successfully in their environments, and since we've been collaborating since 2014, we do have multi-year experience over very large customers. One of the customers that I would like to briefly showcase is sciebo. It's the campus cloud. It's the largest state in Germany. You can see it on the map on the right, and it is a project that has a potential size of 500,000 users, and it's being run on 3 different locations in the state in a kind of federated setup with 5 petabytes of IBM storage in total. It's been in operation for a couple of years. It's running ownCloud Enterprise based on IBM Spectrum Scale / GPFS, and it's providing a service that is really a sync and share service and also a data collaboration service for all the researchers and university staff and students in the state. Right now there are about 45 different entities using the service, and it's highly successful, as we will see in the next slide. So what you're seeing here is a sample of why this is a very interesting scale-up use case. You can see that we have literally dozens of different entities using ownCloud and IBM storage as part of sciebo, with these different tenants here that are showing the rapid growth in users throughout the last couple of years. It has a phenomenal adoption rate, and it's really appreciated by the users. And as we can see, all of these different universities and facilities, they're also a very exciting scale-out use case. So we have, as you can see here, we have a tremendous amount of users that are actually using the software. So it's not just a random software that was deployed and procured by some government agency, but as you can see that we have tens of thousands of users using the software daily throughout the devices. And this is statistically just the users running the client on their machine, so it's not counting the users using them on a mobile device or the web interface. And when you have such a large scale deployment, it will lead to one thing, and one very, very important thing for the success of a solution, and that's what we're going to see in the next slide. If you have a large solution deployed through 6-figure amount of users and tens of thousands of users using the software daily, you will have extremely happy users. And when we look at the enterprise from a traditional point of view, it was usually a case where specialist applications were deployed to solve a specific use case, but often the usability and the user acceptance was a I have to use this acceptance. In this case here, as we can clearly see, of course, all these people could use a Dropbox account. They could use an iCloud account or whatever, but they actually consider the solution that their own entity is providing to them superior to the public cloud services, to the consumer services. And I think this is a fundamental shift in the ability of service delivery of the enterprise. Now, with that said, nothing of that would be possible without the foundation of the hardware infrastructure being provided by IBM and Spectrum Scale. So Götz, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Christian. Let's talk about the infrastructure. We're talking about Spectrum Scale. Maybe most of you know Spectrum Scale already. For many years, it's known as GPFS, General Parallel File System, since many, many years. And it's renamed because of our software-defined infrastructure strategy. We are talking about GPFS Spectrum Scale as a software-defined product. So you can do it and run the application or the ownCloud application on the hardware you like. That's the one part in the middle. But we also can provide an appliance, a solution bundle with GPFS Spectrum Scale, IBM hardware for you. And of course, we can run it in the cloud, but this will not be the use case right now in this case, but maybe interesting for you. We just announced GPFS Spectrum Scale on Amazon Web Services. Let's go to the next slide. GPFS Spectrum Scale is very rich in functions. It's grown up for almost 15 years, and we have ownCloud sitting on top of it, using the file functions of GPFS Spectrum Scale, and using the flexibility and the scalability of the file system. You can grow up into many, many petabytes. You can grow up in the throughput rate by adding services in the way you like to. You know, GPFS Spectrum Scale is well known in HPC environment, and we have a really proven base of clients. In this chart, I could talk for many minutes. But the most interesting things I picked out for you to go a little bit deeper and to look into the functions we could do, like tiering and other functions as well. So let's go to the next slide, because I think tiering is the most important thing we could provide with Spectrum Scale for you in the ownCloud environment. We have different storage tiers. Flash drives by now is gaining more and more into our accounts. Fast drives, slow drives, yes, the SATA drives or SAS nearline drives. But we also can make use out of tape and shift the data over to tape systems. And also we can bring the solution to different locations, like in the global active cloud, where we can combine several locations under the roof of Spectrum Scale in one single namespace. But let's have a look at the ILM functionality, information lifecycle management functionality first. We can use placement policies to place the files within ownCloud into different storage tiers. By the metadata of the data, we can put them into flash drives or into fast drives or slow drives right from the placement. But what's more interesting is on the next side. When you write your policies, or these policies are written by you and the storage administrator and ownCloud, you can bring those data out of the system from the drives or from the flash side onto tape drives, to put the data that's not used, that is doesn't have to be on spinning disk anymore, can be moved out to disk drives in the system you can have. And this, I think, is the most advantage we can bring to you, because with tape drives, you have no more costs on power, environmentals like cooling, or you don't have to pay for maintenance when the data is on the tape cartridge outside in the tape library. So with the next slide, you can see that you are able to move the data out to tapes, and you free up your file system, and or it's still in the file system. You see it as files, but it's not on the disk drives anymore. We did this traditionally with TSM servers. Now we do it with LTFS connections, what we call a Spectrum Archive, and that's the way to move the data out into the to cheap tape cartridges. Another thing that's very interesting for the ownCloud environment is ownCloud by itself is doing high availability, but we could provide with Spectrum Scale disaster recovery functionality over long distances. We have a functionality within Spectrum Scale where you can have asynchronous disaster recovery, where you can have long distances failover with recovery point objectives, and recover the data from a different location if you need a failover from long distance data center. Another part that's also very interesting from the IBM side that we can provide for ownCloud is doing backup of the Spectrum Scale cluster. We can move the data out to the tape library. That's migration, but we also can back up the data to a tape library or even to a cloud system by running parallel backups to IBM Spectrum Protect. And you can scan, or the file system by itself does the scanning. It knows what needs to be backed up, because the file system knows what are the files that are changed. And so you can run several and multiple Spectrum Protect servers to move the data out and make a backup of the data on tape libraries. I think that's a big advantage as well. Coming to the next step, I said we are software defined in the first place, but in the second place we also have a solution bundle for you. We call it an appliance. It's the Elastic Storage Server, and we just made a refresh on the Elastic Storage Server family. It's IBM Power Servers with just a bunch of disk or just a bunch of SSDs behind it. SSD models are the speed models. The other ones are the high capacity models, where we go in raw capacity up to 5 petabytes on the high-end model, in the GL6S model, and in the flash model, and the highest one, in the GS4S model, we reach right now the highest bandwidth and throughput with 40 gigabytes per second on the system. So you can really mix and match these systems. You can put several of these side by side to grow your file system and scale with these systems if you don't want to do it with your own hardware. So this is the hardware IBM would provide for you for this Spectrum Scale environment. And so what's so special about it? What's very special about it is the functionality of the RAID system. Instead of having the RAID running in the storage system, we put the RAID functionality right into the file system. So the file system, GPFS or Spectrum Scale, knows what's going on with the disk drives. I put here on the right side the different naming. We called it GPFS Native Raid. That's the IBM naming, or Spectrum Scale Native Raid. That's why you hear it GNR most of the times. It's a kind of declustered RAID or erasure encoding what we use for this system. And let us have a small look into it. It goes from the client with an extreme data integrity with an end-to-end checksum for silent disk corruption. That's one of the points you get with GNR. The other point is this declustered RAID, this erasure encoding, where we have, in bigger clusters, we have thousands of disks, and you might have failures of the disk drives on a daily basis. And this is, you can see this kind of declustered RAID as a kind of a patchwork we make with the RAID. I don't go into the details, maybe to give you just the main points. You see the patchwork or the striping of the data on the right-hand side. And when you have a failure on the disk drives, and even when you have 2 disk drives failing, you only have, that's the red 2 on the right side, only a specific set of drives that are in the critical state that have to be very urgently to be recovered. And that's the main part of GPFS native RAID or Spectrum Scale RAID, where you have the possibility to focus on this critical drives and to start a fast rebuild test. So you know that when you run traditional RAID, you have with the large disk drives almost 24 hours going for the rebuild. With GPFS Spectrum Scale native RAID, you can bring this down into minutes. And this is just an example. I don't go into details right now, but it's the rebuild test for 2 terabyte disk drives, where we have the focus of the critical rebuild, and all the other rebuilds are built while the system is still reading and writing the data. So that's the main part for the IBM hardware I would like to cover. So now I hand over back to Christian to go into the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Götz, for the amazing insight into the infrastructure technology that's underlying the sync and share technology that I am going to explore on now. So looking at the challenges from an infrastructure perspective, we've covered that, but generally the challenges for the enterprise IT are rapidly increasing expectations of the end users. I'm sure most of you have seen this, that a lot of people will want to push for mobile data usage. They would want to have various services that are not covered by previous workflows and business processes. And when you look at all of these complexities that are adding up day by day, you are looking at an exponential growth, not only of complexity, but also of cost, and of course also of risk, because it is so hard to control all these different solutions that are not fine-tuned to each other, but often consumed as a pay-per-use service or even a shadow IT service. So what are we looking at in the typical shadow IT service using Dropbox as example? We see that employees are in a regulated environment, but as soon as they collaborate within a team, they use Dropbox or whatever file and sync and share solution that they have individually procured personally that is absolutely outside of the control of your corporate firewall or corporate policies. Because how can policies apply to something that you don't know that it's out there, right? So you have no backup, no versioning, no data control, no metadata control. So it's all out there. You don't know what to do with it. You can probably derive that there is something going on by looking at, for example, connections that are happening to Dropbox, or in the case of mobile devices, often not even that, because also the connectivity is outside of your control. So what do we do with ownCloud? We take back the command. We put you back in charge. You have the ability to run your ownCloud service integrated within your current IT environment. And that means that you can now control everything, including the mobile devices, because of course they need to connect back to the server that is now under your control. So you can actually see which mobile devices are working with the data, and you have a full insight into what is happening under the hood of your enterprise, and what the data is doing and where it's moving, and of course who is accessing the data. And so it's a lot easier to integrate services, but also to control leaks or extend and build upon this service for a tailored user experience. What that leads to in the end, and this is our key goal, is we're really trying to be the open platform that's residing in your enterprise or hybrid environment that allows for more productivity and security in digital collaboration. That's really the goal, and that's why we address the key challenges that we see from an application perspective in the enterprise sphere right now. The first challenge clearly is usability. If it doesn't run on a mobile device, if it's not intuitive, people will usually refrain from adopting it. Then there is the next challenge. That is the security challenge. If you as an organization cannot control it, and I'm not only talking about hackers or individual data leaks, but I'm also talking about government actors, either foreign or unwanted government actors that seek access to your data through, for example, subpoenas with specific vendors in specific countries. But even if that is covered, we still have the challenge of integration. If you have something on your enterprise premises or in your hybrid environment that you control, you still need to integrate it, because whatever island of application that is existing for itself will not provide the usability that the end users expect. If you have a mobile application, they want data that they already have in there. That's why we need integration. And of course, lastly but not least, is flexibility, because as we are seeing in the fast shifting enterprise sphere, whatever is good now, whatever is good next year, doesn't mean that it will be good in 5 years. So whatever you deploy, it needs to be as flexible as possible to allow you to move data or services and adapt them according to the challenges. So what does that mean in detail? Usability usually means you would want to have a mobile device, you want great web applications, and what we also feature in ownCloud, you would want to have a good corporate design. With ownBrandr, that means your customers don't use ownCloud. As we've seen in the previous use case, the sciebo users, they don't use ownCloud. They use sciebo because that's the client and branding that they use for the service. So it really allows your users to feel closer to the organization and accept this as your own internal service rather than some random cloud service. And of course, you want all the flexibility in user management, because, for example, if you have a new team that does, let's say, public relations, these people should be able to build a team ad hoc that is a public relations team, so that they can have a data exchange in that team effectively on that platform. And that's what's really going to drive the acceptance. Now let's look at security again. You, as usually someone who is in an IT organization that is supposed and expected to deliver that service, you want that security because it's your credibility. That's why we provide you with a 100% open source transparency that will allow you to actually trust those audit logs that you're seeing in point 1. And it will also provide you with a thorough file integrity check, which allows you to understand which files were changed by whom and that they really have an integrity. And lastly, of course, the file firewall is one of the typical components that is not a generic control tool, but it's a last line of defense. For example, if there was a change in configuration and someone didn't really consider that certain behavior could happen, the file firewall will be there to, for example, prevent sharing of any Office documents, docx, whatever, outside of the IP range of your local organization, and only allow, for example, sharing of PDF documents to external IPs. So this is really a great tool to control your environment and keep tight wraps on it. Then going forward to the integration point, I think that is one of the most extensive points in ownCloud, and that's why it's very hard to properly cover. That's why I will do a very high-level summary here. Generally, ownCloud will adhere to all the open standards. It will allow you to integrate ownCloud into all existing infrastructures and services and allow you to deliver a service that features existing data silos and expose them to the web or desktop or mobile environment. And it's really important because all of these legacy data silos will be enabled with the modern usability that ownCloud provides. And lastly, as the last point that we put up on the 4 challenges, is the point of flexibility. We have a free choice of deployment, whether it's on-premise, in a managed data center, or in a hybrid scenario, or as a completely SaaS service. All of that is entirely up to you and your requirements. We don't have any preferred plan because your success depends on your ability to act according to your policies, and that's why you have the freedom of choice of deployment. You have the access freedom as well. So whether you're using an iOS enterprise mobile environment or an Android-based mobile environment, that's all fine. We support all of that. And lastly, of course, ownCloud Encryption 2.0. It's basically an encryption core that supports a set of APIs that allows you to use the encryption that you want within ownCloud, plugging into those APIs, a case that's typically interesting for government customers. So how do we achieve that? Let's just briefly look at this before we wrap it up. A quick overview. You have seen all the components that you have in your enterprise environment, and you can see that we are running on standards on all of them. And where standards make sense, there's also a point where specialization makes sense. And this is especially interesting in the collaboration that we have in IBM. You see that storage, we are supporting IBM storage. This is one of the areas where, for example, the collaboration between IBM and ownCloud is a tight one because we can deliver a better product from an operational point of view for the administrator by integrating ownCloud specifically and making it aware of the specific storage technology that IBM has that is far better than, say, a random disk drive array. And we make use of that to make your life easier as administrators. So let's just wrap it up with a nice summary. All the companies and government actors that we see are addressing enterprise file sync and share these days. It's become a commodity requirement, and that's what we're seeing. And I think it's a needed one because looking at the consumer success of Dropbox, it's something the enterprise wants, the enterprise needs. Does it have to be from the cloud? We don't think so. We believe it has to be done in a way that is exactly tailored to the enterprise requirements, which means whatever you consider the best way to do it, we are able to deliver that service and that solution. So that's why we say ownCloud and IBM are the perfect solution for known challenges. And with that said, I would like to wrap it up and hand over to the Q&A. Oh, wait, my bad. First of all, we would like to point out that both ownCloud and IBM are present at the ITSA IT Security Expo and Congress in Nuremberg. And that is going to happen quite soon. I'm sure that Toby or Efi will have the date. I think it's in early October. We welcome all of you to come there, have a chat with us, and get in touch with us. Toby?
Thank you very much, Christian. The ITSA will be in Nuremberg from October 10th to October 12th. So we got 3 days full of security and IT. And whoever has the chance, please join us. ownCloud and IBM, as Christian said, they have a joint booth. And we're happy to welcome you all. Regarding the Q&A, it seems like everybody is happy. We don't have any questions at the moment. And I think we can wrap it up here at this stage.
Yes, Götz Menzel here from IBM. If you have any question on GPFS Spectrum Scale, contact my colleagues on the storage side in the countries wherever you live. And if you're close to Germany, you can come up to me.